Hi, good morning, team. Thanks so much, Mark and Nate. That was a great presentation. I'm sure we can find a way to get any other questions answered if you drop them in the chat. My next presenter is Vinod Subramanian, and he's going to be talking about crafting inclusive colleague experience in a DevOps world for digital enterprise digital products. There will be a YouTube, and failing any audio issues, I've enabled closed captioning. So with that, go ahead and take it away, Vinod. Vinod?
Perhaps he's on mute.
Yep.
Hey, Thomas, can you hear me?
Yes, very good, Vinod.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's really nice to kind of share with all of you on a Monday morning on this specific topic with regards to crafting inclusive colleague experience in a DevOps world for enterprise products. We would specifically look at enterprise digital products in this particular presentation. The reason being, I feel when we really look at from a product management perspective, we kind of pay a lot more attention when things are a bit more consumer facing, but when it is more mission critical driven from an enterprise digital products or solutions. There are probably areas that we maybe want to be a little bit more explicit and want to be a little bit more cautious about as we build such products going forward. So that's the bit of story that I would like to share this morning. Thomas, to the next slide, please. So I'll probably kind of give a quick intro about myself, being in the product management and the digital transformation space for quite a bit. Especially as a product manager in the IT and DA side of Boeing, specifically working on enterprise platforms. From a digital transformation perspective, I've had an opportunity to build a few models that really help teams to identify how they can really kind of keep a tab on the entire transformation that they're going through, both in terms of technology as well as more from the process as well as culture perspective. That model was recognized with a Meritorious Invention Award along with a few of my colleagues. And that was in 2020. Prior to Boeing, I have worked with Allstate, it's the insurance company based out of Chicago, and Target, it's based out of Minneapolis. And prior to that, with Tata Consultancy Services. Apart from the work that I do, I also been coached to mid-career professionals, not just in product management, but also in other professions, trying to help them discover the career path that they want to. I'm also a huge enthusiast of future of work, more from the accessibility versus proximity and the opportunity that the whole future of work could provide. That's something that I'm a huge enthusiast of, and try to kind of learn a bit more and see what possibilities are out there. I'm based out of India, and yeah, it's an honor and privilege to be a part of this particular summit. This would be my second time speaking in GPDIS. The last time it was in 2018 in person in Arizona. All right, for today's agenda, it will not be too lengthy, I believe. We will briefly talk about the whole evolution of the software product development, the way it was in the past to where things are headed. And we'll kind of talk specifically about the inclusion layer, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by inclusion in this whole technology context within the enterprise technology space. We'll talk at an abstract level from a case study on an enterprise platform, keeping an enterprise platform as an example. Here, again, from a platform perspective, what we are talking about, I just want to make it much more explicit because Generally in the engineering world, platform refers to something, but here in the technology side, we are really looking at more from an enterprise technology platforms where you can really kind of support multiple business units, so on and so forth. So that's the context in which we are talking, and a little bit of summary of the whole inclusion piece. Thomas, if we could move to the next slide, please. All right, so you might be seeing a lot of boxes there, but I would like all of us to go from bottom to top, right? I think when we really started off from a whole software product development, and it's not specific to any specific organization, but if you look at broadly as well, earlier we kind of really look at things more from a planning perspective. There could be a team that really puts all of that together, and then another team sort of manages everything. And it came with a lot of other challenges as well in terms of the tools, and as well as from a methods perspective. Hey, what's the method that we want to go with in terms of the whole agile framework, right? So there are many formats of it. So the whole context there at the bottom layer is about really trying to bring the whole piece of product development together, and not just stop with the development, but also from a support and sustaining part of that as well, along with the tools and the techniques and the cultural aspects that we can bring together, right? So from there, I think things sort of evolve to the next level that you see more of a DevOps, where the plan, build, and run sort of coming together, forming more of a balanced team sort of a structure, and bringing in that agility. But still, there is always this aspect around the security side of things, which sort of come, or which used to come a little later in the game. And then we kind of really look at that in a post sort of a development scenario, right? Or probably it's coming in a little later in the whole value proposition. So all of that second layer kind of coming together sort of evolved into more of a DevSecOps, where the security part came in much more, I would say stronger in terms of its value proposition, and really kind of bringing in the whole importance of security in the whole development and operations process, so that the enterprises remain much more stronger in terms of any sort of cyber threat or attacks that it could run into, right? So because all the enterprise platforms are very important in running the business, and it's all mission critical, considered to be mission critical. So from that perspective, it is also very important to make sure that they are also safe and secure from any of such threats. Thomas, if we could click one more. So the whole DevSecOps, and this is something I think most of all the attendees in the session would know from a benefit standpoint, right? So it really gave us an opportunity to get a software product safer and sooner, right? I think the software product, putting together all of that was there even earlier, and sooner part came in with the whole agility and the DevOps, the automation side of things coming together, and with the safer part built in, which is more from a security perspective. It sort of gives a much more stronger value proposition. And this entire cultural shift around shifting things to the left, and this has happened in many times in the past as well, and we have kind of evolved, right? Even the agile flavor came in from that sort of a context of how we can shift things left, and really looking at more from a waterfall sort of a scenario. But can we run things in parallel in terms of doing things in a very smaller chunks, but at the same time improving the quality of the output and the outcome, right? And bringing in the whole automation in terms of the tools that we would use, and the integrations along with that, so that it drastically reduces the automation, and also really simplifying it, the whole the infrastructure associated with that, so that people don't get challenged from like what tool to use, but it's much more defined and streamlined, saying that, hey, this is what we use, and we just focus on solving the business problem in terms of that particular value layer, rather than really looking at into the deep of infrastructure and other things that somebody need to be worried about. And the whole compliance aspect comes along with that in terms of industry-specific compliances or even like geographic compliances like GDPR and others to make sure that as an enterprise platform serving our colleagues across different countries and geographies, we want to make sure that it is all compliant as well with the local laws and regulations. So with that overall context, I would like us to move to the next slide, which is more about a short video on this whole DevSecOps, where it would kind of really cover aspects like what are the benefits and myths and some of the challenges. Thomas, if you could run that.
On this one here, I'm not too sure if the audio will come through, but I have enabled closed captions if you want to read along, Vinod.
Yeah.
If you clicked on this video, you're probably wondering what all this buzz around DevSecOps is. Well, for starters, Gartner predicts that DevSecOps will reach mainstream adoption within the next 2 to 5 years. So, we know for a fact that
Okay, looks like we lost the audio. Initially it was there, but I think after a few seconds we kind of lost the audio. Thomas, do you want to play it not in the full screen mode, but back in the website mode? I mean, I think when you started off, it was coming in through.
Is that working now?
Not yet.
DevSecOps is a growing
Yes, now we can hear.
software companies in the upcoming years. Now, if you feel like you've got a bit of a catch-up to do with DevSecOps, don't worry, we've got you covered. By the end of this video, you'll know more about what DevSecOps is, the common myths around DevSecOps, and why implementing it can do you a world of good. So let's get started. So, what is DevSecOps? Put simply, DevSecOps means adding, you guessed it, security into your DevOps pipeline. When you do DevSecOps, you don't treat security as an afterthought. Instead, you add it to all the stages of your development pipeline, so the component of security is baked into your product. What this means in practice is that everyone, not just the security teams, is responsible for security. Yes, that's right. The primary goal is to minimize malicious attacks and defend cybersecurity threats as much as possible. And all this starts right from when you begin coding and continues until you reach the production environment. Myths about DevSecOps. Now let's do some myth busting around DevSecOps. Myth number 1, you need new developers to implement DevSecOps. Reality? Not necessarily. DevSecOps doesn't mean that your developers alone are responsible for anything and everything. Your security team will also be a part of the process, and they'll pitch in with feedback and insights whenever needed. DevSecOps brings together different teams and encourages team ownership, not endless blame games within your teams. Myth number 2, you can replace Agile with DevSecOps. Reality? That's not how it works. Agile focuses on improving business value by involving your customers in your project. DevSecOps provides you with the tools and methods to accomplish that. You see where this is going? DevSecOps and Agile need to coexist for the best results. Myth number 3, you can just buy DevSecOps. Reality? Not exactly. Sure, you can buy tools that help you with CI, CD, or any other software development phase, but you cannot buy DevSecOps, the methodology itself. So, If you're looking to implement DevSecOps, focus on helping your teams collaborate and improve their skills related to security practices and processes. You don't need to shell out big bucks. Is it worth it to make the transition to DevSecOps? Let's look at the details. Benefits of DevSecOps. Now that you have a basic idea of what DevSecOps is, let's see what's in it for you. 1. First things first, it strengthens your overall product security. Many DevSecOps practices, such as automation and quick feedback loops, help you achieve better security. Also, your security tests become more efficient and consistent, so if something goes wrong, you'll be equipped to find out what happened and fix it quickly. 2. You'll be able to identify most of the security vulnerabilities in your code at its early stages. That's great news, because this way, you'll spend much less money on fixing those issues. 3. If you're constantly worried about security bottlenecks slowing you down, fret no more. DevSecOps is here to help you out. You no longer have to wait till the development phase is finished to run your security checks. The end result is that you achieve accelerated product delivery. 4. DevSecOps means that multiple teams are involved in security. Therefore, you're likely to come up with more powerful security response strategies and security design patterns. 5. DevSecOps can come in handy when it comes to understanding and complying with industry standard regulations too. Do you sometimes have trouble understanding and complying with industry standard regulations? It saves you hours of labor because you don't have to backtrack the activities that you did to prepare reports. That's because pretty much all the information that you're likely to need for security logs and compliance reports will be available readily in a DevSecOps environment. Yes, DevSecOps can seem intimidating at first, but the benefits are significant, wide-ranging, and long-lasting.
Right, so that summary really is there out there to kind of really help to bust some of those myths or inhibitions that people might have in terms of at what context it can be raised and what are some of the questions, the usual questions that comes to people's minds. So just want to kind of lay it out there before we move on to more from adding the entire new layer there. Thomas, we can move to the next slide, please. All right, so this DevSecOps graph, right? The entire infinite loop is something that we might have seen well often, but what we want to add on top of that is the inclusion layer to it. The reason is we are getting the software safer and sooner, but one aspect that we really want to be cognizant of, especially while building and managing enterprise products, even if it is out of the shelf COTS products, this is something that we may have to keep in mind because the conversations could be slightly different in terms of the persona that we really pick, right? So the inclusion layer is something that we may want to really bring in, and we have to really pay attention to about 3 big bullet points when we really want to bring in the inclusion layer into this whole infinite loop. If you can click next, Thomas. Right, so we kind of broadly look at it from a people, from a process, and from a product perspective. So what do we mean by people, right? So it's all going into the users, our fellow colleagues who might be using the particular product. So need to ensure that there is a B2E, and we might have heard all this B2C, B2B, B2C sort of different segments, or even B2G for that matter from a government perspective. But B2E, which is more about business building for its employees, is something that we will have to kind of pay a little bit more attention to build that persona into the context of that particular product or solution that we are building, and be much more explicit around that in terms of identifying the geographic sort of limitation, whether it is for the US domestic versus any international, and how that really stands out, right? So again, the context is enterprise products that really runs the mission critical business products and applications. So we have to make sure that such practices are built into the system. And also there should be continuous engagement with that end user community, because most of the times the challenge that people usually run into while building and delivering enterprise software solutions is that they probably don't get to interact as much as with the end user, and they probably kind of have to interact with someone in between. It works out a lot, and that is done more from a time availability of that end user's perspective, but at the same time, getting that in-person sort of a conversation or that particular conversation really helps to tailor the solution to much closer to what they're really looking for, and validating a lot of assumptions that we might have. And also from a process perspective, like inclusion checks built in, we'll see one of those examples in the next slide. But what we are really trying to say is, as we are trying to build like no trust sort of a security mechanism built into this entire DevOps through a DevSecOps, we also need to kind of really build out that inclusion perspective into each of those layers, in terms of while building as well as while kind of from a deploying perspective, from a testing perspective, and even from a monitoring standpoint, right? So we want to make sure that that is kind of completely built into this process and doesn't stay different from or probably specific to the technicalities associated with DevSecOps. And from a product perspective, as I said, it could be a cloud native custom development, or it could be an ERP or a off-the-shelf SaaS product. We may want to kind of make sure that we kind of view it from this particular inclusion lens to make sure that it works for the users and where they are, and how they're going to really use it, and also measure it more from some of those key metrics such as adoption, right? Because most of the times from an enterprise software product solutions, this is an area probably where I have noticed overall in my career is that we probably don't measure it as much as how we probably would measure them from an B2C or a B2B sort of a context. So this is something that we really need to bring in while building and kind of or kind of scaling any enterprise products and solution. I'll quickly talk about one case study there into the next slide, where it's more from an enterprise software platform. Thomas, if we could go to the next slide, please, where it is just about how we really tried this in one of the enterprise platforms to really bring in this inclusion layer from a product mindset as well as from a usability, where we started building in the B2E persona by their roles that they really perform, like for example, a requester versus fulfiller, so on and so forth, so that it gives a much more context to what sort of an information that they would need so that they could be productive as well as successful in what they are trying to accomplish in the entire value chain. And also having that ongoing user interviews and conversations also really helps to put this inclusion layer into practice. And from a process perspective, after getting to know about the persona, laying out the journey maps so that we could really identify the happier parts as well as where there is a friction built into that existing process, and how we can really help them alleviate those frictions and make it much more productive, right? And most of the times, all of this is really going to help our fellow colleagues to be much more productive, so that they could really spend that time into much more value-added activities. And also from a continuous discovery, and that is much more critical. Most of the times in enterprise, we kind of really look at from a delivery perspective, but the continuous discovery is also something that we need to build into this entire process, where there is, and this can be accomplished through, like, if you're following some sort of a scaled agile framework or any such agile format, it could fit into the program increments and iterations wise. You could kind of make sure that there are enough time and space built in for this discovery process so that it caters to the user. And that sort of connects back to the adoption as well, right? Where from a product perspective, when it is really making sense and they are able to really engage and give that sort of a feedback, we are able to kind of measure automatically in terms of that how people are using that particular product, and are they able to kind of get things done quickly, if that is what the intent of that particular product is supposed to be. Then we have to make sure that the whole study is done to make sure that the frictions are reduced, as well as like the number of steps could be reduced. That is something that we have to pay attention to, and also explore different capabilities within that particular platform and see how that could be unlocked, the potential of that could be unlocked in benefit of the our user community as well. So in that way, there is a much more chance for us to really bring in those whole inclusion layer into our enterprise context as well. And this is something that I think if you look at Google or any such companies, they are practicing it at multiple levels. But this is one quick example of how we can really bring it into this whole enterprise software ecosystem as well. Thomas, if we could go to the next slide, please, to kind of really summarize, and probably we'll leave few minutes for any Q&A. So the whole inclusion in the enterprise technology products, I think that has a huge scope in terms of really unlocking that particular potential, and building those personas for software products, and really building that B2E sort of a segment is very, very critical. And most of the times we lean into some of those off-the-shelf products in that context. But there is also cases where when things are much more proprietary, when off-the-shelf products are unable to fulfill, then we really look at some of those custom development as well. But the B2E segment is much more crucial and critical because they support the entire mission critical aspects in the value chain. And from an inclusion perspective, it needs to be blended into this whole DevOps process and culture, because DevOps is not just seen as a process, but it is also about the culture, the thought process, the mindset in which how we really engage with multiple teams and put everything together. And from an inclusion perspective, it also means how we really build products for our fellow colleagues who needs to have some sort of accommodation in terms of accessibility, or even from the color choices that we might make. We want to make sure that the products are suiting for them as well. And in the large organizations, I think in any digital transformation that's happening across the industry, we could see a lot more modernization, simplification, and automation efforts. But to kind of really champion that, like how we see customer success sort of roles emerging in some of the product organizations, the colleague success and colleague experience is something that need to be kind of focused to make sure that it is also free from any sort of bias. And as we really build those sort of large-scale enterprise software products. So ultimately, this entire evolution, right from the plan, build, run to the DevOps, the balance team sort of a concept, along with agility, then kind of really putting in the security into that entire dimension of DevSecOps by adding and making sure that whatever the small points that we discussed here, it will also help us to bridge the gaps in terms of inclusion into this entire framework of engaging with the B2E segment, and to make sure that they are supported, they are heard, and the products and solutions are catering to their needs, while we bring in industry best practices as well to play. I think that's all we have from a presentation perspective. I'm open for any questions that I can help with. Thank you.